Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second chapter of Wheelock's Latin. We're going to do a real quick introduction to nouns in English, and then we're going to look at nouns in Latin, particularly beginning the system of cases and looking at the first declension pattern through the cases of Latin. So let's get started with a real brief overview of English nouns. It's always helpful to try to get an understanding of basic English grammar when we're starting to learn another language, just so that we can explain the unknown by appealing to the things that we know. Now, I often give my students at the beginning of a semester for elementary level Latin or other languages a little pop quiz, and that is I ask them this question: Are these two words the same here? Wart and warts. Are those the same word? And usually about half the class raises their hand for one, half the class raises their hand for the other on whether they're the same word or different words. Technically, you might be thinking this is a trick question. These are different words because there is a different spelling for them. One has an S that makes it plural. But I would actually suggest that these are the same word. These are the same word. So the answer is yes here. What they are, though, is there are different forms of the same word. They are different forms. Okay? So same word, just different forms of the same word. How do we know that? If you were to look this word up in the dictionary, you wouldn't find two different dictionary entries, one for wart and one for warts. You would find one dictionary entry, the word wart, and then within that entry, you might have different forms of the same word, right? And I do that little pop quiz just to explain something, and that is that words can have various forms and still be the same word. And that's what's going on when we come to the inflections of a language. What are inflections? Inflections are changes to the word form, usually the ending, sometimes the vowels, to mark the word for various grammatical functions in the sentence. Words can be inflected to mark their case, which is understood as their function in sentence, as well as number and gender. So I've given you a couple of examples here in English. So consider the word book versus the word books. There's an inflectional ending that's been added here, the s sound on book to make it books, and that marks number. This turns the second form into the plural compared to the singular form. Number two, consider the difference between foot and feet. Notice here that the inflectional change is not an ending, but a vowel change, the to e sound. This also marks a change in number. It becomes plural versus singular. This happens with some other words in English. It's not the dominant pattern, but it does happen. So man in the singular, we're not adding an s to make it plural, mans, but rather we're changing the internal vowel to the sound, men. And then on number three, we have child versus childs. And here the inflectional ending is an S or a Z sound. Depends on how the word ends. Child, childs here, right? That's actually a Z sound, even though it's spelled apostrophe S. But this is an inflectional ending that marks possession. Okay? So we have inflections in English. They're not as common. English isn't a highly inflected language, although once upon a time it had more inflections in its history. Latin is a highly inflected language. Almost every single Latin word is marked with some inflectional ending to signal important grammatical information. So let's talk a little bit more about inflections in English. Let's start with case. Case marks the noun's function within a sentence, and in English we only have three cases. And you may remember this from your early grammar classes. I don't know, but the three cases in English are subjective, possessive, and objective. Now, Latin has six, so they are rich in inflections. We'll talk about that in a moment. Most English nouns do not change their form to distinguish the subject from the object, and so you don't really see inflectional forms for typical nouns. But pronouns in English do. They are highly inflected. They retain those case forms. in the variety of cases in English. So I'll use just a simple noun here for my examples, comparing them then to pronouns. Okay, so the first singular pronoun, which has to do with I, is the speaker. Third plural, they, and then compare that with Harry in these forms. So the subjective case is used for example when the noun is the subject. So Harry loves Sally. Notice that Harry is this simple form. In objective case, we would use that for when the noun's the object of a verb. So Mom loves Harry. Notice that the form of Harry hasn't changed. And then for possessive case, we have Mom loves Harry's hairdo. So here, Harry is the possessive noun. It has the apostrophe S. There is your inflectional form. But aside from that, really not much change goes on. But let's compare the first person plural, the first person singular pronoun and its case forms. I love Sally. It's I when I'm the subject, but Mom loves me, not Mom loves I. I change I to me here for objective case when it's the object of the verb. And then when it's possessive, I becomes my. So Mom loves my hairdo, not Mom loves I hairdo or Mom loves me hairdo, right? We have a possessive form. So there's quite a variation here in the forms. And then with they, the third plural pronoun, we see they as subjective. They love Sally. Mom loves them. There's the objective form, not Mom loves they. And then Mom loves their hairdo. There's my possessive form, not Mom loves they hairdo and Mom loves them hairdo. All right. So that's case in English. We do have the remnants of a case system on the pronouns. Number refers to singular or plural, recall. And here we have our examples that we used a little bit earlier. So book versus books. There I'm adding the S sound. Foot versus feet. I'm varying the internal vowel. Child versus children. Notice here I'm using a less common ending for plurality in English, but these do mark the inflectional ending for number. Latin nouns also mark for numbers. So in our chapter, porta is one gate, portae can be plural gates. All right, now inflection for gender also happens in English, but there's some differences here between English and Latin. Now in English, all of our nouns are construed as either masculine, feminine, or neuter. So the word man would be masculine, and I would use a masculine pronoun to replace that noun, he, right? The man, he went to the store. Woman is feminine. I'd replace with a feminine pronoun, she. Bicycle is neuter. I would replace that with a neuter pronoun, it. English nouns tend to follow natural gender. So if something has a natural or biological gender, then that will be its grammatical gender as well, typically. Latin nouns sometimes follow natural gender, but often they simply have a grammatical gender. And so this is a gender that is grammatical, but that grammatical gender, which we will call masculine, feminine, and neuter, there's no inherent genderedness to the noun itself that has whatever grammatical gender it has. Okay? So for example, porta is the word for door or gate or entrance, but there's nothing distinctly feminine about a door. All right? Now, let's talk about Latin nouns. We'll transition here. Nouns are words that are used to designate person, places, things, or ideas. And we could think of semantic categories for nouns. We could speak of common nouns versus proper nouns. So here we have urbs for a city. This is any city. This is naming a category of thing called a city. That's a common noun. Versus Roma. And here we're designating a specific noun that is a city. A noun with a name, like Rome. So that's a named city. That's what a proper noun is. So I can speak of the man, right? I'm using the word man as a general or a common noun, but a specific man might be Billy, right? That man has a name, and Billy is his name. That's the proper noun. Bridge versus Golden Gate Bridge. Now, nouns can also be construed of as abstract versus concrete. Ira is an abstract noun, anger, and porta is a concrete noun, gate. So I jokingly like to distinguish abstract nouns from concrete nouns by saying concrete nouns are something that if you were big enough, you could put it in your pocket. So if I were big enough, I could put a porta, I could put a gate in my pocket. I'd have to be a pretty big dude. But I can't put anger in my pocket. Abstract nouns are not pocketable things. All right? So they're concepts. They're things that aren't tangible. Okay, concrete nouns are. So those are just some categories of nouns. There are more, but these two are introduced in Wheelock. Now, we want to talk about the syntax and the semantics of the 6 cases of Latin. Remember, English has 3. Latin has 6. The purpose of our survey here in 2.2 is not to introduce the specific forms of the cases, but to introduce the concept of the cases. What meaning is associated with case use? And we'll learn the forms over several chapters, including the one we're in now. So let's start with nominative case. Nominative case nouns in the nominative case serve one of 2 main functions. They could be the subject of a finite verb, or they could be the predicate, or what is sometimes described in linguistics as the complement or the subject complement of a copular verb or a linking verb. Now let's take each of these in turn. Here is an example. Virgil eats Thai food. Here, Virgil is the subject of the finite verb. So Virgil does the eating. The case that Virgil would be in Latin would be nominative case because he's the subject of the finite verb. Now, in the other 2 sentences, I have a copular verb. So here is my verb is, and Virgil is hungry. Virgil is the subject of that copular verb. The copula is the verb to be. And notice that the subject complement or the predicate is hungry. So in Latin, Virgil would be nominative case, and the word hungry would likewise be nominative case. Anytime I'm making a predication about a subject, I'm asserting something that the subject is. The subject will be nominative, and then what I say about the subject. He is hungry, he's a man, that will be the subject complement. Now, in this last example, Virgil looks hungry. Virgil is still the subject, and he would still be nominative case. Now, the verb looks is strictly speaking not a copula. Okay, I'm not saying that Virgil is hungry per se, but he certainly looks hungry. This is what's often described as a linking verb, and I'm going to put LV here just as an abbreviation. And what happens with linking verbs like looks, appears, seems, smells, right? These are roundabout ways of predicating, but using a different word. And what we're saying is that Virgil is hungry by appearances, and that would be the subject complement of the linking verb. And in Latin, this would likewise be nominative case. Okay, so these are the sorts of places where we would see nominative case forms. Now, the second case is the genitive case. Nouns in genitive case generally serve to modify or to qualify or to limit some other noun. Such genitive nouns can be translated using the key word of, and then the meaning of the noun that's in the genitive case. Frequently, though not exclusively, they indicate possession. There is a typo, sorry about that. They indicate possession. That is, the genitive noun is the possessor of the other noun in which it's in a genitive relationship. So I have 3 examples here. I drink the coffee of Caesar. So in Latin, this would be the word coffee with the word Caesar next to it. And the word of wouldn't be here in Latin, but Caesar would be in the genitive case. And so that would indicate a relationship to the coffee that I drank, that it is the coffee belonging to Caesar, the coffee of Caesar. A second way to translate such a Latin sentence would be to make the genitive noun possessive form in English. I drink Caesar's coffee. So these 2 English sentences could reflect the same Latin sentence with Caesar in genitive case. And then thirdly, This example is just to show you that genitive case doesn't always mean possession. Caesar holds a rod of iron. Iron here would also be genitive case, but it's not possessive in meaning. It's not Caesar holds iron's rod, right? But rather the genitive form is indicating the material out of which the rod is made. So genitive is usually possessive, but not always. Dative case is the third. Nouns in dative case are indirectly affected by the verbal activity and so typically mark indirect objects, things that are described grammatically as indirect objects. Semantically, the recipient or the beneficiary of the action. Dative nouns are usually rendered with the keywords to or for, followed by then the meaning of the noun in the dative case. So again, when a noun is used in the dative case by itself without a Latin preposition in front of it, you can translate that dative case noun using the word to or for in English. You're adding that. So, I give the coffee to Caesar. In Latin, I give the coffee Caesar, but if Caesar is in the dative case, then I'm going to translate it as to Caesar. Or in the second example, the word Caesar is the indirect object. He's the beneficiary. We make Caesar an offer he can't refuse, right? We're making an offer to or for Caesar here. So that would be dative case. Accusative case is the fourth case. Nouns in accusative case typically mark the direct object, the object most directly affected by the verbal action. Now, when we translate nouns that are the direct object and are in accusative case, we don't need extra words to translate them as we were using with genitive of or dative, to or for. You just translate the noun in the accusative case. Now, up excuse me. Up above, we have two sentences, and I ask you which of the nouns would be accusative. I give the coffee to Caesar. Coffee is the object more directly affected by the giving, and then Caesar is the one benefited by or recipient of the coffee. I give the coffee to Caesar. So this would be the direct object grammatically. Caesar would be construed as the indirect object. And then we make Caesar an offer. The offer is what we're making. That's the accusative. That's the direct object. And Caesar is the one for whom or to whom the offer is made. That's the indirect object. That would be dative case. All right, so you can see which nouns would be accusative there. Now, sometimes the noun in the accusative case is governed by a preposition. We have lots of prepositions in English as well as Latin. Prepositions like to, someplace, after, something, right? To, after, for, with, by. So during, these are all prepositions. Now, in Latin, we have specific prepositions that we're going to learn that will take their object in a particular case, like the accusative case or the ablative case, which is coming. So just a quick word about terminology then. The word that introduces the relationship like to or after, this is called the preposition. The noun that the preposition is governing is called the object of the preposition. And then the preposition with its object is referred to as a prepositional phrase. Okay, so I'll be using that expression throughout our class. Sometimes I'll abbreviate it as PP. Okay, so a prepositional phrase. So our example here, the troops came to the city of Rome. Here I'm using the preposition that means to, up to, in Latin. So there's my preposition ad. Urbem is my accusative noun, to the city. And then Romam is in apposition to the city. It is renaming the city more specifically. And that is likewise in the accusative case because it is in apposition to a noun in the accusative case, urbem. All right, so they came to the city of Rome. They came ad urbem Romam. So this whole thing is a prepositional phrase here. And that preposition ad takes its object in the accusative case. So when you're translating prepositional phrases, you translate the preposition's meaning, and then you just translate the noun's meaning that is governed by the preposition. Now, in the fifth case, we have ablative case. Pardon the pun. Nouns in ablative case serve to modify or limit the verbal activity in an adverbial way. If the ablative noun occurs alone, that is, it's not governed by a preposition, it's not in a prepositional phrase, then you typically translate the noun in the ablative case with an extra keyword, an extra English preposition like by, with, or from, and we'll learn some other possibilities as we go on. If the ablative noun is governed by a preposition, then translate the preposition and then the ablative noun without the extra English words. So here are two examples, one of each sort of scenario here. I bought coffee, and then here is pecunia in the ablative case. There's no preposition here, but I need to translate this as with money, because if I just say I bought coffee money, it doesn't make good English sense. But the ablative is used to indicate by what means, with money. Okay, so there's a situation where I'm adding an extra word from English that's not in the Latin. But in the second example, I sang with the poet. Here I have the preposition cum. Let me spell that properly. So there's the preposition, and this preposition takes its object of the preposition in the ablative case. And so I don't want to take the ablative noun and translate it as with the poet, and then translate the preposition cum as with, because then I'm going to get I sang with the poet, which is not what I'm trying to say, right? So remember, when I have a preposition, I translate the preposition, and then I just translate the bare meaning of the noun itself that's in the ablative case due to the preposition's requirements. I sang with the poet. You'll notice, by the way, that I've been using the article here for some of the translations. The Latin language doesn't have articles, so if using an article makes sense, we have to supply one in English, and that's a context-dependent situation. Now, finally, we have vocative case. Vocative case. Nouns in vocative case name the addressee. In English, we have described this in our grammar classes as the noun of direct address. These nouns almost always use the same form as the nominative case. And so you'll assume that that's true unless you're told that that isn't the case. Again, pardon the pun. When we use vocative case, the Latin interjection o is often used with the vocative noun, although it doesn't have to be used. So here's an example. Julius, I brought you coffee. Now, Julius is the vocative noun, but I want you to notice that its status in the grammar of the sentence is that it's technically unnecessary grammatically. Or to put it another way, if I dropped the vocative noun and just had I brought you coffee, that would be a perfectly good grammatical sentence. So vocatives are extra words whose grammatical status is not obligatory, but yet they're important because they name the addressee in a particular context. Hey, Julius, I brought you coffee. Now, here in our second sentence, I have, oh, girl, I love you, right? Girl is my vocative noun, and I have the interjection here, oh. So, oh, puella, I love you. Now, let's talk about first declension nouns and adjectives and the pattern that they follow. A declension, it's a word we're going to use a lot. A declension is a pattern of inflections for nouns and adjectives in all the cases. Verbs have patterns of inflections called conjugations. Nouns, adjectives, have declension patterns. So we could talk about conjugating verbs, but we decline, it's related to the word declension, we decline nouns and adjectives by indicating all their case forms. There are 5 main declensions in Latin, and what determines which declension a noun follows is what the noun stem ends with. That is, the noun has a stem or a base, and we're going to add case endings to that noun stem, and which declension pattern a noun belongs to crucially depends on what the last part of the noun stem is before we add those case endings. First declension nouns have a stem ending with a, okay, the a. So when you're given a new noun, you're going to be given two forms of it, the nominative singular form and the genitive singular form. And so as you acquire vocabulary, you should learn both, because we're going to learn that the genitive form will often help you to identify the noun stem and to know which declension pattern the noun follows. Now, how do nouns differ from adjectives? It's a good question, and you maybe have never thought about it. But nouns and adjectives are very similar, and yet they are different. What's the difference between the two? Formally, nouns are marked for a single gender. A noun doesn't change its gender all the time. A noun has a single gender. Adjectives, on the other hand, inflect for all genders because they have to be able to agree in gender with what they modify. So if I am talking about a big boy, the word big in Latin will need to be masculine. If I'm talking about a big girl, then it needs to be feminine. Okay? So here I have the word porta, which is a noun, and as a noun, it has one gender. In this particular situation, it's the feminine gender. Now, the second is magnus, and magnus is an adjective. And so you'll notice that we actually have three forms of the adjective magnus, meaning big, and this is the masculine, feminine, and the neuter form. Magnus, magna, magnum. All right? So adjectives are inflected for all the genders. Nouns have one gender. So you'll learn the gender of nouns as you come to them. Now, most first declension nouns, and that's what we're going to deal with in this chapter, first declension nouns, most of them are feminine. So when you see a first declension noun, your assumption can be that's feminine unless you're told that it's not. There are some masculine nouns that are first declension, and usually these are nouns that indicate a profession. So you learn these in our lesson. Nauta, which is a masculine first declension noun, not a feminine one, means sailor. Poeta, that's a masculine first declension noun, means poet. So here is the first declension paradigm. I'm going to show you here. We have singular in the first chart, plural in the second. Second column, technically speaking, this is not the case ending. It's the stem vowel plus the case ending. So we're actually seeing the ending of the noun stem, which has the A, and then the case ending attached to it. Sometimes that stem vowel A is going to be obscured by the case ending, so you won't see the A in all the forms, but you see them in most of them. And then the third column gives us the stem or the base with the case endings of a particular noun, and here we're using porta as our sample, our paradigm noun, and then the English gloss. Okay, so here are the stem vowel and case endings for nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative case. And I'll use a little eraser here as a pointer. I want you to repeat after me. Ah, I, ah, ah. You'll notice that nominative and vocative are the same, as we've mentioned. And then the ablative is an A, but this A of nominative and vocative is short. Ablative A is long. Now, we add these to the stem, and we get porta. I want you to repeat after me. Porta. It's just the gate or a gate. Portae. Of the gate. I'm going to just use the definite article here. Portae. To or for the gate. Dative case. Portam. Just the gate, as in I love the gate. Direct object. Ablative. Porta. By, with, from the gate. And then vocative. Porta. And here I'm addressing the gate. Oh, gate, I love you. Now let's look at the plural forms of first declension. The stem vowels are I. You say these after me. I, autumn, is, as, is, I. Again, notice the nominative and the vocative are the same. Autumn is the genitive. Again, we're getting the stem vowels here of the alpha. And for dative, we have is. It's the same as the ablative. This is going to be typical with our case endings. Dative and ablative are the same. And then accusative is as. So here the alpha, or excuse me, the a is obscured from the vowel stem. Now let's add these to the word for gate, porta, and you can repeat after me. Portae, so the gates, plural. Portarum, of the gates. Portis, for the gates. Portas, the gates. Portis, by, with, from the gates. And portae, O gates. All right. So for memorization, because we're assuming vocative is the same as nominative, for memorization's sake, we can really focus on these first five here. Okay. And I'm going to give you a song that my kids used to sing when they were in classical conversations to memorize these first declension forms. And their song leaves the vocative out. So I'll teach you this. Just understand the vocative is one of the cases, but it'll be the same as the nominative. And the song is to the tune of Bingo. So you know that song, B-I-N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name. Oh, all right. So this is the first declension case endings to the tune of the refrain of Bingo. Ah, I I singular first declension. I, autumn, is, as, is. I, autumn, is, as, is. I, autumn, is, as, is. Plural first declension. Great. So we want to work on memorizing those. The English gloss I've mentioned uses the article. As I mentioned before, though, the Latin language doesn't have an article, so you have to supply one if appropriate. The definite article is the, and the indefinite article is a or an. Now, we want to make a comment here about attributive adjectives. Remember, we just looked at the noun porta, but we have adjectives in this chapter as well. Adjectives are words that are used to modify a noun, to provide an attribute of the noun being used in a clause. Attributive adjectives indicate what kind of noun is in view. So in English, the happy boy ran. I'm talking about what kind of boy ran. The happy one, right? The happy boy. I ate a slimy worm. Slimy is the kind of worm I ate. These are attributive adjectives. In Latin, such adjectives usually immediately follow the noun being modified, although sometimes the adjective can come before, they can precede, if they're adjectives of number or size or quantity. Now, most importantly, and this is why I have it underlined here, attributive adjectives must agree with the noun they modify in case, number, and gender. So, I've got three examples here. I praise the old country. Laudo patriam antiquam. Okay, laudo patriam antiquam. Notice here that I praise is going to take a direct object. This direct object is patriam, and the adjective that modifies the patriam is going to agree with it in case, gender, number. So notice the ending. What case, gender, number is that? This is accusative and masculine and singular, right? And so not only does the accusative masculine singular form attach to patria, but it attaches to antiqua as well. Okay, so we get that same case ending. It has to agree. We frightened the big girls. Terremus magnas puellas. So here is my verb. We terrify. Magnas puellas. So Yeah, this is my direct object, okay? Puelas. Notice I've got the as ending, and the adjective, which is attributive and modifies, has to agree. These are accusative, but they're not masculine singular, they're feminine plural, right? So they both have to be that. And then much money summons great fame. Multa pecunia vocat magnam famam. So you'll notice that pecunia is the subject, and so its case is nominative. It's nominative, feminine, singular, and the adjective that modifies the noun is going to agree with it in case, gender, number. So multa is feminine, singular, and nominative because pecunia is. Summons, vocat, and then magnam famam. Here, famam is my direct object. And as a direct object, it has to be accusative. And this noun is feminine singular. Notice that the adjective magnam is going to match its noun because it's an attributive adjective in the same case, gender, number. And so it uses the same case ending. Magnam famam. Okay, so last thing is in the chapter at the end, Wheelock suggests that you learn how to describe morphology and syntax. That is, that you attempt to describe the noun or adjective's morphology or form, what's its case and number. I would suggest even gender you can describe as well, and its syntax. Syntax describes what word in the sentence another word is related to that determines its form and its function, what function it has in relation to it. So I'll just give you two examples here from above. Patriam, in our first sentence, this is accusative feminine singular noun. That's describing its form, its morphology. It's dependent upon the verb laudo because it's the object of laudo, and it functions as the direct object. That's so those things are describing the syntax, its relationship to other words that might determine why it's in the form it's in. Antiquam is accusative feminine singular adjective. It's dependent on patriam because its relationship is one of modifying. It's an attributive adjective, and so it modifies the noun patriam, and therefore it has to agree with the noun patriam. Okay, so that's describing morphology and syntax. Hope that helps.